What is the state of content writing in 2022? Of course, content writing being anything that you write to engage, to attract, to start a conversation with your audience and keep them loyal. Things like emails, like newsletters, blog posts, YouTube videos. That's really value first and is not outright pushing sales. That's where copywriting comes in. But we're talking about content writing today. So if you want to learn more about the state of content writing in 2022, stay tuned. We're getting right into it. Welcome back to the Emma Gibbons Content and Copy YouTube channel and podcast. You can listen and watch in either format so that you never miss an episode. The YouTube videos come out every single Thursday. The podcast episodes come out every single Monday. And we talk about copywriting, content marketing, and entrepreneurship on both channels. If that sounds interesting to you, then please consider subscribing on YouTube. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And make sure you are subscribed to the podcast as well, because you never know, even if you love YouTube, while you're on the go, you might want to tune in to an episode of Emma Gibbons Content and Copy. So the biggest change I would say that has happened this year in 2022 is undeniably kind of inevitable. And I think for better or worse, people are becoming aware, desensitized, frustrated by the facts, which is just that there are so many voices online right now. There are so many new social media users this year. Let me get you the stat. 4.62 billion social media users. That's a crazy number. And Instagram alone has increased by 10% from last year to this year. Like, it's just crazy numbers. And of course, lots of those people are consumers, which is fantastic. Your audience is out there. But also, other business owners and your competitors are probably getting louder. Some of them might be really naturally great at TikTok and you hate the thing. So there's a lot of noise basically. And when you're creating content, it can feel frustrating, but you have to remember a few core principles. And I think this is where people start to get into trouble, is they forget what really makes your content writing stand out and makes it work for your business. You don't need to be the most followed person online. You need the right people to hear you, and the right people, of course, we're ideally trying to convert them into your customers and clients. So that's all that really matters, is that you can get where they are, they hear you, you provide value that they're looking forward to, that builds trust and makes them invest with you first time and time again. So before creating your content, you want to think about these three things. Number one, define. Start by defining your audience. Who are they? Who do you want to speak to? And if this is new to you, or you feel like, I thought I was clear on this, then watch my video, and I believe we have the podcast version as well, about the best way to actually do a productive ideal customer avatar. And it's not like a lot of the online business coaches teach. There's a lot more to it in one sense, but also we've broken it down into really digestible steps. So go and check out that video. It will help if you're not already able to answer this question with absolute clarity in mind and confidence. Also make sure that you've defined and you're super clear on why your offers resonate with them. How do you get them from where they are to absolutely loving and enjoying and being grateful for the product or service that you offer? What is kind of the messaging that brings them from where they are to working with you? Content should be written with those definitions or those needs in mind first. So make sure you're defining the goals essentially. Number two is trust. This of course includes speaking with sincere, authentic language, giving honest examples, sharing what you truly believe, standing up ideally for what you believe in, especially because Gen Z, if your target audience falls on them, or if they're at least part of it, and of course they're growing up as well, they're getting older, they are very, very motivated by working with companies or buying from companies that share their values, social values. And younger millennials, I would say, are very much like this as well. And that part's more anecdotal, but I'm one of them. I'm on the very low end of the millennials, and absolutely, it does determine my buying behavior. It's just even more intense with Gen Z, so keep that in mind. But on top of those things, it's also, trust gets built with consistency. So, you show up on the same platforms at the same day and time every week. Like, we put out a YouTube video on the same core pillars every single Thursday. Same time. They all get released at the same time. So people come to expect things from you. And you can do that with lives too. Like, don't just randomly go on Instagram Live, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live. Like, have a day of the week and a time that people can expect that from you, because then people will remember, they'll show up, and they'll also see you as someone reliable whose business is thriving, and that builds their confidence in you too. That consistency has added benefits as well, which means that they know that you're the expert on your topics because they're hearing it from you, possibly over and over and over again. Like, I often define the difference between copy and content. Copywriting, content writing. I do it on YouTube, I do it on blog posts, I do it when I have a presentation. It's usually the very beginning is just making sure we're super clear on what those two things are and what we're talking about today. And people come to trust me for that and expect that of me, and they see me as an expert in that area because I am, in a sense, repetitive, but I would also think of it as consistent. So trust also gets built from consistency in those ways too. Now the third thing is research. So ditch the jargon, please. Ditch the buzzwords, because neither of those are going to resonate with most audiences. Jargon, maybe if you serve a really specific clientele like lawyers and they're super comfortable with legal terms. But other than that, people either just don't understand, and if they don't understand, they're not going to be following you, they're not going to be buying from you, for many different reasons, one of which is it may make them feel bad, it may make them feel kind of dumb. But buzzwords as well make people so annoyed. And they don't mean anything more than just the audience members that might get annoyed from hearing the word pivot for the gazillionth time. It's also just, it doesn't have meaning anymore because constantly people are talking about, let me think of an example. Okay, so maybe synergy. Like, what does that really mean? Or think outside the box. Okay, but what do you want from me? Like, in what ways can I think outside the box? Because it stops being concrete, stops meaning something really coherent because it's just so overused. Or like I said, it might just turn people off because it's so overused. Instead, you want to speak in your ideal audience's language. What words and phrases do they use in their conversations? How do they talk about their problems? How do they talk about what they want? You might think, well, they might say they want this, but really they need this. Well, forget it. When you're first meeting them, which is generally what content writing is, it's one of the first ways they're getting to know you, right? Maybe they found you for the first time on social media, or they've just joined your email list and they don't know you super well yet. You want to focus on where they're at. And you want to seed plant and build through the varying types of content you have to educate them so they actually better understand why they need your product or service, essentially. But when you first meet them, and with, I would say, the majority of your content, you really want to be focusing on where they are right now and how they talk about their problems, what they think their problem is, so that then maybe in the same post you can start to change their mindset a bit. You can also do really great research with tools like Answer the Public. You can also mine reviews, so Amazon reviews for examples of how your people speak, your own reviews or your own testimonials to see why people loved your products and how they described the challenge they came in with. And of course, you can do things like conducting market research interviews or larger scale market research as well if you have the budget. But honestly, if you just go into a Facebook group and say, hey, I'm looking to talk with someone who's got this, this, and this. If you can spend 15 minutes with me answering my questions, I'd love to say thank you by sending you a $10 Starbucks gift card, or giving the other 15 minutes of our session could be me giving you a free laser coaching. Just offer something in return. And I had that work for me many times. So, and I've also seen it work for other people, of course. So you can honestly start from there. It doesn't have to be expensive to do market research. All right, so now you're probably wondering, how do I turn these amazing insights that I got from these three into content? Of course, a great example of where all these things come together is your website, like your blog. That is part of the face of your business. You can also think of your Instagram, Facebook, your social media platforms as the shop front of your business, like your website. So you want to make sure that you're using all these insights in the content you create across the board for these different platforms, those kind of first impression platforms that then draw people into a greater relationship by joining your email list, by downloading your freebie, by following you, etc. So here's a list of 10 things you want to keep in mind as you start to actually create your content. Remember who your audience is and write with them in mind. You can see the direct relationship with those top 3 that we talked about before. Know your purpose with that piece of content. What do you want that audience member to do after they've read it? Do you want them to go and download the accompanying freebie? Do you want them to go read the full blog post on your website if you gave them a snippet on social media? And write with that in mind as well. Think about your sitemap. So think about the flow that someone is likely to go through when they do visit your website. And I kind of think about this in a couple different ways. If you know a lot of people end up on your website through SEO, through you sending people to your blog, then think about what the journey is from someone who lands on a blog post to getting on your email list or to checking out your services page. How do you make sure that you're planting seeds or invitations, calls to action at every moment, at every transition, so that they do follow the journey you want? And it could be another direction as well. It can happen through your homepage and all of that, but I'm thinking very much about content and less about copy. So let's think about it as someone coming in through the blog for the first time. Or maybe you draw a lot of people in through your YouTube channel. So once they've arrived there, how do you get them to continue the journey? How do you get them to eventually go to your website and download the freebie and become part of your email marketing community? So think about their journey. So more than a sitemap, it's also the journey that they're going to go through. This can inform some very technical things when we talk about the sitemap, like, you know, what kinds of buttons do you have? What is featured on the right-hand side? Maybe you have an email sign-up form visible beside your blog post on the right-hand side the whole time. Maybe you have a pop-up form that comes triggered when someone visits to your blog. Like, these can get into more technical details. So make sure that you're thinking about all the different ways to essentially capture the audience and make them part of the community that you own, which is essentially your email list. Number 4, look at what your competitors are doing. Look at their content and evaluate whether they're doing things super well that you can learn from, or they have some gaps that you could fill in. And I think a YouTube video, and I believe it's a podcast episode as well, that goes into great detail on this type of research and kind of mining, in a sense, is about SEO in 2022. So still super relevant right now as well. I can imagine that even if you're watching this in 2023, this is going to still be a relevant video to you. Definitely go check it out. We'll have the link in a card here on YouTube, and we'll also put it in the show notes and the YouTube description below. Remember that simplicity is your friend. So if you remember us talking about jargon earlier, think about it like this. Most writing for the web and for copy, especially like sales writing, is written for someone at a grade 3, sometimes called a grade 4 level. That is pretty basic. Still great information can be transmitted that way, but it's very simple. It's very to the point. There's not a lot of kind of convoluted twists and turns. It's super well structured. In many ways, it's very active versus passive in terms of the way that you write. It's very direct, and the results are almost always better than if you were writing in an academic style or what you consider a professional style or a very creative literary style. It's usually going to be better if you're just imagining you're talking to them, to their grade 3 mind. Think about it like kind of like that. 6, prioritize. Put your most important message or messages at the top, whether it's an Instagram post, a YouTube video, like when they see you in the intro, blog post, make sure the most important message is at the top. Just make sure, because no one wants to go skimming for the most important point or the most important message. Sure, maybe they're going to get a little bit of an answer or a sneak peek, and then they read in more detail later because it's promised them that, yeah, you are going to find out what you want. You know, skim for this section. You can have headers that also help them find it really quickly. But basically, the closer to the top, the better. Kind of think about it like newspaper articles. At least when I was in school, we still had to learn about the structure of newspaper articles, which is that, like, basically in the first paragraph, you had the who, what, where, when, and why, and then it was like extra details, like the bulk was up here, and it's almost like an inverted pyramid. So you can also think about it to a certain extent like that with blog posts and social content as well, but make sure you've got your strong, impactful, bold message, especially if you have one, at the very top. 7 is keyword research. So again, I'm going to point you to that fantastic SEO video, but make sure that it sounds natural, of course. I'm just going to remind you that if you're going to be using SEO, make sure you don't go into the territory of keyword stuffing, because it gets picked up and gets penalized by most platforms that are functioning like search engines. But also it feels super unnatural if you're just shoving unrealistic keywords everywhere. talk like a real human, but do your best to incorporate those great SEO best practices. So on top of that video, actually, there's an amazing checklist that we have that we've found so helpful. I still use it sometimes, our team still uses it, and our clients definitely use it, which is the 10-step checklist to an SEO-friendly blog post. So that is absolutely going to be linked for you in the podcast show notes and in the YouTube description below. It's fantastic. Number 8, I'm going to say this as consider investing in SEO. You can do this to an extreme as well, but if you have some budget at least, if you can invest in someone doing an SEO audit on your website, some keyword research for you to make sure that you're writing your copy and content with that in mind, to map out a basic blog post structure with all of your headers already done, your meta description done, it can be wonderfully relieving, and you know you're being strategic. And it also sometimes, especially with the blog post ones, they often do research, of course, on the key phrases people are looking for, right? So they're giving you, in a sense, your topics, and they're also giving you the structure, and you kind of can fill in the blanks. That works for a lot of people, so consider it. It may be actually quite a bit more affordable than you think, depending on who you work with, and especially if they're creating skeletons like that for you, or just providing research and maybe they're not implementing for you. There's usually package options beyond what you might assume. I have a really great partner who does this for us in our business, so if you're interested, be sure to send me a message and I'd be happy to share that information with you. Number 9, make sure to make whatever type of content you have visual. Sometimes it's super obvious, like you're writing a script for a YouTube video is going to be visual. You're going to be posting, a reel, and maybe you're posting an image on Instagram with your caption. Of course, it makes sense to be visual. But don't forget that it's great to have visuals in your blog posts too, or in your email marketing as well. You want to do it intentionally and have it help, like the visual is relevant. It has the alt text in the background, again, talking about SEO. So that way you get all the SEO benefits too, but also to visually break things up for your reader, to draw the eye further down the page. There's so many benefits to having a really nice visually appealing blog post, email, etc. The other thing that I would say with that as well is that sometimes your content is best conveyed through something like an infographic. Don't forget about that. I think they're underutilized in a lot of ways. I think we're getting pretty good at creating things like infographics, for example, on Instagram carousels. I think people still need to do them more. I think that's a huge opportunity to create shareable content, but you might also have infographics that are freebies and they're downloadable, or an infographic that explains the main point or the process of your blog post better. And you can also use that for pinning on Pinterest. So definitely remember that you can make things visual with an infographic as well. Number 10, and we hinted at this in a former number, but use the active voice whenever possible. So say, I bought some cherries yesterday, instead of the cherries were bought yesterday. Try your best to be very active in your language because it keeps the momentum going. It puts emphasis on the subject. It's just generally easier to read. So it keeps people paying attention to your blog post, your caption, etc. And a bonus tip is to keep your content fresh. Do an audit, see how great your blog posts are performing. What posts are people constantly coming to that could use an update? Maybe you write a 2023 version, or maybe you create a video to go along with it, or you make it a podcast episode topic if you didn't do them kind of all in one go. It can be fantastic insight into what your audience loves. You might also find that the old version of a blog post is no longer in alignment with your brand voice, and it's worth creating a new version that you replace it with, especially if that version wasn't set up very well for SEO. Make sure the new one is in your new brand voice with your new messaging, points to your updated freebies, and is also set up for SEO, so you get all the benefits you can. Now lastly, I'm going to give you my 4 favorite tips to make any blog post better. One is to have a great hook. So you can think of this when we talked about copywriting formulas like AIDA, attention. So we grab attention often by using questions, emotions, big bold claims, sometimes pain points, sometimes stats. So it's just something that triggers attention and makes people curious enough to keep reading and to learn more. 2, consider what your call to action is going to be. Sometimes, especially if you're more of a creative, you're going to write a blog post and you're kind of going to get around to the point through that practice of writing, and then you're very likely to need to restructure, which is just the flip side of being a very creative person. Editing is a really important part of it, but ideally you're going to have at least some sense of the call to action you're going to want to guide people to at the end of your blog post, at the end of your Instagram post, what you're going to tell them to see at link in bio, if you're going to ask them to engage in the comments below, if you're going to, on YouTube, send people to the specific website page. And that way you're able to make sure that all of the content that you're writing is leading towards that final call to action. So it has a journey that it's taking, and it doesn't feel kind of like, oh, this is a great tip and that's a great tip, but it's all kind of leading towards one main point, one main call to action as well. So that's definitely a piece of it too, right? Like, make sure that you're not just thinking of a call to action in terms of getting them to sign up for your email list, download a freebie, but also like, what's the main lesson you want them to walk away with? Do you want this to be educational? Do you want this to be an opportunity for them to get to know you? So think about that purpose as well. 3, keep it conversational. You want to make sure you sound like a real human, like yourself. And some easy ways to do that are to, again, remember, pretend that you're talking to someone who's in grade 3, or the adult with their like grade 3 mind, in a sense, like picture the grade 3 self. And other things are actually way simpler than you realize, like just making sure you use contractions on purpose, which is especially important to think about if you're used to writing for academia or for, you know, corporate environment. Use contractions. Don't say I will. Use I'll. Automatically, it sounds conversational because that's how friends talk to each other out loud, in text. Makes a huge difference. So that's one quick tip. 4, if I haven't said this enough times, SEO always makes your content better. It means that you are writing about what they care about, what they're looking for actively. And of course, if they're looking for it actively, then they're already going to be quite warm to the solution that you're proposing as a result of the education you give in your blog post. They're way more likely to then, you know, sign up for your email list, maybe book a sales call. It's a really wonderful opportunity. So use SEO. Again, we have all those resources in the description box below. We have that great video about how to create content with SEO in mind, and that's really the dedicated purpose of the video. We have that fantastic checklist if you write a lot of blog posts to make sure that your blog post is 10-step checklist to make sure it's optimized for SEO. It's not as complicated as you think, and I'm so happy to share more information about, you know, great SEO, like the agency we work with who helps with SEO, or how we use SEO as copywriters on our projects and how we can actually offer that to our clients without them having to come in with all the research done. Just take that off their hands. We also write SEO-friendly blog posts where the research is done for them and we write the blog post for them. So if that's interesting to you, be sure to get to know emmagibbons.com. Set up a call with me. I would be so happy to talk to you about it, especially if you're so busy, but you know SEO is incredibly important and you need to create content on a more regular basis because it's so incredibly powerful. I hope that that is the lesson that you've taken away from today. It's incredibly powerful to write fantastic content, and that SEO needs to be more and more a part of it. All right, this was probably a super long video, but I hope that you found it incredibly helpful for content writing in 2022. And I hope that you take at least one of these many ideas and tips away from you. What was your biggest takeaway from this video? I would love to hear it in the comments below on YouTube. All right, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We release new ones every single Thursday. And again, I'm going to point you to right now, go off and watch that amazing video about SEO. Go, go, go. It's right here on your screen. And I will talk to you next time.